Hi, and welcome to the Authors Marketing Event 2023, our 8th year and our final year of doing this. But we're going out with a bang, and I have with me Mark Gottlieb. I know I probably mispronounced that French-sounding name and stuff like that. But Mark is going to be talking about agents and the value they have for authors. So with that, Mark, it is all yours.
Okay, thank you so much. And yeah, I'm glad to be here and helping out. And I'm happy to tell everyone about Trident and myself. So my name is Mark Gottlieb. I am a literary agent with Trident Media Group in New York City. We represent many authors, probably thousands of authors, many of them #1 New York Times bestselling authors, major award-winning authors, you name it. The agency's been around since about the year 2000, although our company controllers have been in publishing much longer than that. And our agency, according to Publishers Marketplace, happens to lead the entire book publishing industry, both in terms of number of book deals and amount of money for book deals every year, year over year, going as far back as the year 2000. So right away, that'll tell you no other agency is doing as many deals, nor for as much money. It's not said to brag, it's just meant as, good information. What else can I tell everyone about us? We represent authors, not just in terms of their books, but we look at a book in terms of the many manifestations it can take. So we work in the area of audiobooks and foreign rights for books in translation. We do quite a bit of work in the area of book to film and TV, getting our books adapted into the film and TV space. And then we help look after every kind of aspect of an author's life that they could ever need. So for instance, we have a digital media and marketing department that helps to market and promote our authors and their books in the digital sphere. We have an accounting and a contracts department that helps to do, the legal review of the publishing agreements, and then accounting, obviously tracking the payments and all of that information. So we really help to look after the kind of author's entire spectrum of their career. The way in which we work with clients typically, a literary agent is really like a talent agent for authors. We help represent authors to the book publisher and then to help find their audience. And when the book is a success, we help them, replicate that process. So it's much like what a talent agent out west in Hollywood, California does for like a movie star or a director, only we are specific to authors and books, which is why we are based in New York City, which is where book publishing is really properly situated. So that should give you a pretty good sense of us. I would say probably the closest thing to our industry is, I suppose, what like a real estate agent does for someone when they want to sell their house or their apartment. The real estate agent won't say, pay me or I won't sell your apartment. Like they will sell the property and then they take a commission for doing so. So that's our work. We sell the books for authors to publishers. They garner book advances and royalties, and the agency keeps a commission, which is standard to the industry, of 15%. And so the client receives 85% of the monies as they come in. One, I guess, such example of how we might work with an author is, depending on whether it's fiction or nonfiction, if it's fiction, there'll be a full manuscript. We'll work with the client to, review their material and their query letter, which is like a cover letter for the book, and make sure the manuscript feels polished or ready to go. And if that is the case and the client is working with the agency, we will craft a pitch and a list of various editors along a submission. I'm just going to pause there to answer a question that came into the chat, and I'll read it out loud. It says, is that percentage the same across the board or varies based on book versus movie translation? So the question being asked is with regard to our agency's commission, and our commission structure does indeed follow industry practices and norms. It's one of the reasons why We list it there on our website for the whole world to see on our submissions contact us page. So yeah, no smoke or mirrors there. Every agency you were to look at keeps the same exact commission structure, and I'll just paste it into the body of the chat here along with that link so people have that readily available. But basically, yeah, our basic commission is 15% for book deals we were to perform for clients in North America. And then in foreign countries, it's 20% or 25% in certain foreign territories. And for film and TV, it's 15%. The reason being for a higher commission in the foreign markets is that the cost of business doing overseas is much greater. You have foreign taxes, exchange rates, bank fees. Oftentimes you end up having to work with travel, to work with co-agents or co-agencies. The advances tend to be smaller. The books sell in different numbers. So to really make the numbers work, that's why most agencies will charge that kind of commission structure in the foreign book space. And you'll really see 20% mostly in the major markets overseas. So, like the UK or Italy or Germany, big markets, but in these kind of smaller tertiary markets where, we have to work with a co-agent or co-agency who understands the intricacies of that market and the language and the culture and all of that, that's where we charge at 25%. And it's barely breaking even. It's just to help make the numbers work so that clients can say, I'm published in every country and Croatia, or something like that. So just getting back to what I was saying before, assuming we're working with a client and we have an agency agreement and all set to go, we would craft a pitch and a list of editors at various publishing houses. We go out on submission, we field offers from publishers, negotiate to the best of terms, and present the client, hopefully, with an offer from a publisher or multiple offers, as the case may be, which is always very exciting. If the client decides to accept an offer from the publisher, they pay a book advance, like a large lump sum of money for the chance to publish the book. So to maybe use a simple figure, let's say it's $100,000 book advance. Typically, most publishers will pay a book advance, half on signing and the second half when the manuscript delivers to the publisher. Those advances, all monies then typically flow through the agency. They are commissioned by us at 15%, and that's where we pay on the remaining 85% of monies to the client. When we furnish the client with a fully signed copy of their publishing agreement, we give them an accounting of all this. We send them royalty statements as they were to come in, and that's pretty much the deal-making process right there, end to end in a nutshell. Of course, there's a little bit more before, in between, and thereafter, but that should give you a pretty good kind of global sense of things. The benefit, obviously, of working with an agency is, well, first of all, most major publishers will not accept an unsolicited submission from an author unless it comes by way of an agency. So if you were just pick up the phone or email, you would get a response like, well, who's your agent or agency? And then if you didn't have one, they would just kind of refer you out or suggest you come back with an agent. Part of the reason being that a lot of publishers don't want to deal with authors who are kind of wet behind the ears, or agents or agencies work as kind of a siphon filter for a lot of material. They kind of sift through a lot of stuff before it gets to the publisher, and can really help the author through the publication process to make for a good and a happy and a successful publishing experience. So working with an agent or an agency is a great way to have like help with the on-ramp, on the superhighway of book publishing. Some of the other benefits are that obviously a submission from an agent gets more attention from a bigger agency, perhaps like ours, where we have a lot of clout with publishers. Our business goes to the bottom line to most every book publishing company. So when they get a submission from Trident Media Group, they tend to perk up and notice the submission, and it gets the right kind of attention. We also, as a result, have better negotiations with publishers. We have much stronger publishing agreements with publishers because we keep like boilerplate kind of form agreements with publishers, which have been like pre-negotiated over many years. And so the terms in these contracts are much more preferential, certainly, than an author can get just sort of walking off the street and asking a publisher for a deal. Even if you were to show it to an attorney and have them review a contract, the lawyer can only ask a publisher for certain things in a publishing agreement, but it doesn't mean the publisher is going to agree to any of it. Whereas with us, it's already pre-established in an agreement. And when we ask a publisher for something, it's not just one person asking, it's the entire agency, or many authors that the agency represent asking. So it produces a much better result for authors. So we can, not just help in terms of the book deal, but then also help in the publishing process itself. So a big part of that is, asking a publisher for a copy of their marketing and publicity plans, such that we might comment and improve upon those plans, all in the spirit of success, of course. Make certain recommendations to see what the publisher can be doing, to see what the author can be doing, to see what we can be doing. One of the things we like to get for clients from publishers is like a production calendar of events, such that the client knows when certain materials are going to be made available to them, so they're not sitting in the dark wondering, when am I going to see final edits on my book? When will I see the book cover or any of that? They know by which date, to expect certain things. So we try to really take a holistic approach and look at authors in terms of not just book deals, but in terms of careers, to try and sit together and not just look at the horizon, but try to imagine what could be on the other side of it. So I think these are a lot of the benefits of working with an agent or an agency, especially an agency like ours, which probably takes a much more unique approach compared to a lot of other agents or agencies. It's not to speak pejoratively, but to really give sort of the facts as they are, in that most other agents or agencies are going to be probably very transactional in their nature. They tend to kind of do the book deal, and then it's sort of like, see you later until the next book deal. But we like to take a much longer view and an involved kind of view to help the client, again, wherever they feel our help is wanted or needed by us. So I don't know if there are other questions. People are welcome to share with ASB, or I guess there's a way to place them in the chat. I'm happy to speak more to kind of what agents or agencies do, and to also mention maybe what's helpful to some authors starting out, writers who are like basically hopeful writers looking to become published authors. But I'm seeing one question which reads, you mentioned the long view. Does that mean you look more for series or style novels? That depends on the author and what their goals are and what they're looking to do. Of course, like the market is going to have a say about it. But when I say a long view, I mean helping authors become career authors. So, for instance, in the world of commercial fiction, a lot of authors will publish a new book every 12 to 18 months. Or if it's the matter of a series, it might be setting up a series with a publisher. Although a lot of publishers now are really keen to do more so standalone titles to see how those books work before considering doing more books or building them out into a series. So, but really, when I say a long view, I mean helping an author, across their career and into the future. We have a lot of clients who have become very successful to the point now where they are basically, career authors doing this full time. They quit their day job and they write, and they make a great living doing that. One other question that popped up, it says, for self-published authors that have built up good sales for their books, and they plan to do more, would an agent consider the author? So yes, I mean, I think that does depend on a few factors. Most books that sold at least 10 or 15,000 copies will impress most publishers. In the self-publishing space, the books need to have sold at a decent price. You know, it's hard to kind of make that leap into publishing when a book was selling at, 99 cents, and then a publisher has to convince consumers to, pay exponentially more for like a printed version of the book or a higher priced ebook or audiobook. So sometimes in self-publishing, it requires selling even more copies. And then the work has to kind of meld well with what the needs are of the marketplace, what's currently working well in the marketplace. But certainly, if the sales numbers and the material justify it, then oftentimes authors can make a leap out of self-publishing into traditional publishing, which is great for a lot of authors because certainly traditional publishers will offer book advances and royalties. The book will get out there in a bigger, more meaningful way. It will have better distribution, can find its way into other mediums like film and TV and foreign rights and audio. It's much harder for self-published books to, find their way into the film and TV space when those studios really need something more to hang their hat on because they're looking for what we call like tentpole properties, basically books that became mega bestsellers or won lots of prestigious awards. And so for people at a studio to convince executives there that a book should be a movie when it was self-published is much harder to do. And then I think part of the other challenge with self-publishing is whereas there's a lot of creative control and freedoms there, there is a glut material in the self-publishing space, and it's often a race to the bottom in terms of how those authors price their books. So the self-published authors who I found have been most successful are authors who've either kind of engineered themselves out of self-publishing into traditional publishing or found ways of becoming sort of like a hybrid author where they concurrently are doing some self-published books, some traditional published books, so that they're not simply at the whims of the self-publishing ecosystem if Amazon changes the way it does things or that market changes. Someone wrote, when a self-published author is contacted by a studio, should they reach out to you as an agent, and if so, why? Probably it is a good idea to get an agent in an instance like that because an agent can negotiate a deal, will know what is fair or standards in terms of the market and what authors should be getting in the film and TV space. So they'll know how to negotiate a deal and position a book with a studio. The author will also get the benefit of if the agent is helping with any of the contract review, like either referring them to a talent attorney or something like that. Certainly that's a benefit to the author. And then from there might be a way to further, engineer the book into traditional publishing because, hey, if there was any kind of film or TV excitement for a book, that might be good cause to, approach publishers with something like that. So I think it is helpful to have someone, in your corner advocating on your behalf and trying to help you, through the publishing process in almost like a managerial sense or like like having someone who is a business partner to what an author does. I don't know if there are other questions. I'm happy to speak to more of perhaps what I think is helpful to authors in starting out. What you would really need is different depending on whether you're an author of fiction or nonfiction. If you're an author of fiction, you really want to have a full manuscript because that's how fiction is typically sold to publishers. So it can't be partially written, and it needs to be within a normal word count range that kind of adheres to what people are looking for, within normal book count ranges of maybe 80 to 120,000 words, give or take. Obviously, the word count excuse me, ranges are different for different kinds of genres of children's books. For nonfiction, you really want to have a book proposal and a couple of sample chapters. That's how those books are sold to publishers. So you don't need to write the full manuscript necessarily in the case of nonfiction, although some memoir is a little bit different. And you want to accompany this stuff with a query letter, which is basically like a cover letter for your book, introducing agents to, your book and yourself. And I think what goes into a good query letter is it basically kind of like a cover letter, fits all on one page. The information is concise and easy to disseminate, but basically a good query letter might read something like, dear so-and-so, I'm seeking representation for my debut novel titled blank for readers of blank and blank in which, and then maybe you give a one quick line, a hook, an elevator pitch of what the book is about, then a body paragraph or two of some of the exciting plot details without too many spoilers. And the last paragraph is best left up to the author in terms of, this is who I am. This is my background in writing, some of my writing credentials, stuff like that. That I think all constitutes a good query letter because it's fast, it's easy to read, and it's a good opportunity not to just showcase the meat and potatoes of what the book is about, but also who the author is and some of the quality of their writing. If the letter is good, then oftentimes the agent will want to request the manuscript. Question I'm seeing in the chat, it says, realizing that your business is about the numbers, other than having a great manuscript, what are agents looking for? Well, again, it's going to be different in terms of fiction and nonfiction. And a lot of this stuff will not just be editorial, but it will be also the needs of the marketplace. So for instance, let's say there's a particular genre that's doing really well at the moment, like maybe you've written a rom-com, or I don't know, maybe in the case of nonfiction, it's a topic that's very current and hot in the news right now, so it feels like very, very present, and that publishers would be interested in it. That's sort of one consideration. In terms of nonfiction and fiction, the other big difference is, well, in nonfiction, it's not just that you need to be an authority on your subject matter and that it be an interesting and unique idea, well written and presented nicely, but also that you have a big platform behind you, because nonfiction is very platform driven, in that publishers want to see that an author has perhaps hundreds of thousands of followers or 1 million followers or something else that could constitute a big platform. Like maybe they do speaking events throughout the country throughout the year, hundreds if not thousands of attendees, or maybe they've given a TED talk, or they have a big newsletter following, things like that. They really want that built-in audience, because they feel like if the author has a big audience and just a fraction of those people buy the book, then the publisher will be in great shape. In terms of fiction, the platform is more so constituted of the author's writing experience, their background in writing, any kind of writing credentials they might have. So if they've gone and gotten their MFA degree, or they publish in prestigious literary magazines or journals, or they attended a really well-known writer's workshop, things like that, all count toward kind of these writing credentials, or those bells and whistles. But again, at the end of the day, it's going to be, is it a good book, like a good story? Is it well written? That's always going to kind of matter most and win the day for authors. One other question I'm seeing in the chat, it says, in reference to numbers, we've heard that agents are also focused on social media. How many followers does the author have, etc.? So I spoke to that a little bit. The more the merrier, but high engagement is really important. Publishers have become a lot more savvy about how they look at an author's social following. Like, you could have 1 million followers, but if they're not really engaged or doing much or responding with the posts, the publisher might think to themselves, well, do they pay to have these followers? Like, are these bots? Are they real people? So sometimes a lot of it can have to do with that. And again, a platform can mean many different things. Like someone writes an article that goes viral, right? Or someone gives a TED talk and it gains 1 million views. Like, there are different things that can kind of constitute a platform for an author. So it's not a simple equation of, okay, you have 1 million followers, so you should write a book and a publisher will publish it. It's not just as simple as that. One other question here says, there are writing events that have agents attend to do manuscript reviews or pitches. Is attending those events and talking with those agents worth our time and energy? Well, I mean, it depends on the event. It depends on the person. It depends on the agency. If you're talking with someone who's really like a mover and a shaker, then yeah, then that's good. But if you're talking with someone who, I mean, look, with the age of the internet, anyone can build a website, put up a shingle and say, I'm a literary agent now, but that doesn't mean they've sold any books or done anything really meaningful. So I think the best thing to do is really kind of make a almost like a wish list of like agents or agencies an author really, really wants to work with, and kind of start at the top and kind of begin to, work their way down such a list. Um, I think a lot of the writers' conferences and workshops, like, again, it depends how meaningful the event is. I find they're most useful for writers in terms of, networking, getting a feel for the industry, honing kind of their craft, just understanding what's working well in the marketplace. Um, Sometimes I pick up clients at conferences or workshops. It happens from time to time, but pretty rarely. I mean, a lot of it also just comes from referrals or people kind of cold querying us through like our submission form, or me reaching out to authors. But I think part of the problem with the conferences and workshops is that it just kind of becomes like a free for all where anyone can pitch an agent, and sometimes they're not really ready to do that. Even though they want to, it doesn't mean they're actually ready to do that. So I think like taking the writing as far as they can, getting all the bells and whistles together that they can. If it's nonfiction, making sure you have a strong platform, building an author website so there's some kind of online presence. Some authors go as far as to get like endorsements, praise, blurbs, whatever, from well-known authors ahead of them approaching agents or publishers, or at least the promise of that. All of this stuff really helps in a lot of ways. There are a lot of events where, the authors who approach you are ready. Um, and it's really hard to know, I guess, when you're ready. If someone tells you you're not ready, you don't want to hear that. So, um, you know, I think it's a toss up, but I think just approaching the agents or agencies directly is perfectly acceptable. Going on their website, reading about the agency, reading about the individual agents, looking at the books they work with, contacting them and following their submission guidelines and all that. One other question here says, are agents focused on specific genres or more general? That depends on the individual agent or agency. There are some agents who only want to do a certain kind of book. Like they might be an agent who, hey, they just do children's books, or they only do romance books or women's fiction. I personally do work with a range of genres between fiction, nonfiction, even children's books and graphic novels, because I don't really like to limit myself in any way. I like to keep life interesting and unique and work with authors in different spaces, and for authors writing in different spaces to feel like they have someone who can help them in different areas. The agents who specialize, they probably want to be known as, oh, well, that is the agent you go to if you do that kind of book, which I can understand. But at the same time, if you're working within one specific sector of the marketplace, and then suddenly, let's say, that type of book is not doing well in the publishing space anymore, then those are all the authors you have on your bench. Like that's your team, that's it. So you're done at that point. I had a colleague who, she originally had done a range of things in the women's fiction and romance space. And then when erotica books became really big with authors like E.L. James, who wrote 50 Shades of Grey, she said, well, I just want to be known as the like de facto erotica agent. And we said, well, okay, if that's what you want to be known as, but you should continue taking on clients in the romance and women's fiction space so you have a good bench of authors behind you. And then when that sector of the marketplace tanked, when erotica wasn't doing well anymore and had really moved mostly into the self-publishing space again, and that, you know, her biggest client and those type of authors weren't producing for her anymore, she was done. That was it. So you have to, it's like in any kind of business, you have to diversify your portfolio. You have to be in different areas to really like withstand, you know, changes in the marketplace. So another question here says, we have heard a few stories where best-selling authors had to wait 10 or 15 years to publish to finally discover them. Can an agent reduce that time or avoid that, or is it up to the need of the current market? Well, I don't know the specifics of, you know, some of these individual stories. Like it sounds like it could be almost like conjecture. You know, I would probably need more of an example, but maybe it's like an author who writes a certain kind of book and then the publishing world just isn't ready for it. And then suddenly the publishing world wakes up to it and the time is right. Like one of the best examples I could probably give is Dan Brown, who wrote the Da Vinci Code. For a very long time, he was actually what we in the publishing industry would refer to as sort of like a mid-list author. Like he wasn't like a huge, big best-selling author at starting out. He had a few publications before the Da Vinci Code, which were relatively quiet publications. His editor, Jason Kaufman, who was at St. Martin's Press, and I think he went to HarperCollins before he landed at Knopf, part of Penguin Random House, you know, where he published the Da Vinci Code with Dan Brown. You know, he just kept believing in Dan Brown and publishing his books. And whenever that editor moved, you know, the author followed him, which happens a lot in publishing. What happened for the Da Vinci Code, no one could have really seen it coming, because when that book was a huge success, a lot of publishers went back into their backlist of previously published titles to find out, like, well, what can we kind of repackage and publish quickly in this kind of, you know, religious conspiracy, treasure hunting, you know, kind of space to compete with this book, because they wanted to really ride that wave. If they were to wait for someone to write a manuscript, it would just take too long. They were going to really miss the wave. And so in going back into their backlist, a lot of publishers couldn't find a whole lot. But what they realized was there were a lot of people who were reading for the subject matter of conspiracies having to do with Mary Magdalene and the Catholic Church in the nonfiction space. And so what it told publishers right away was there was a big underserved or underrepresented audience who you know, was trying to find a book like this in the fiction space and couldn't. So they were reading about this kind of subject in nonfiction. And then along comes Dan Brown, unwittingly writes this book and creates a tidal wave. And it was completely just the water cooler effect, because people wanted this book. It just no one knew. So you could say, yeah, someone like Dan Brown was writing for years. I don't know if it was 10 or 15 years, but some number of years until people were really ready to discover him and his books. So sometimes it can happen like that in strange ways, you know, when the time is right for authors. You know, I'm trying to think what else could be sort of helpful to authors, you know, in starting out. I mean, definitely having a query letter, a well-written query letter, you know, having the manuscript, the book proposal, and the chapters is ready to go and in the best shape. Again, having some kind of online presence is great. And you know, approaching the agent or agencies that you want to work with, that's all the correct ways, you know, of doing this. I think beyond that, you just sort of had to have a lot of grit, like a lot of tenacity about you, because there's you know, it's the road is never straight and narrow. It's always long and windy. There are bumps on the road. But the authors who I've always seen, you know, succeed are the ones who were really in it for the long haul and just kept on going and kept believing themselves, just beating that drum until, something connected. Um, and so I think that's really what you need to have a lot of in this industry. It's like, it's grit and just that willingness to persist. So it is true what they say, like 80% of success. Is just showing up. Um, so I hope that, and some of the other information, I gave, uh, take some of the guesswork out of it. Um, One other question I'm seeing here, it says, you're based in New York City. Is it important to have an agent that is in the heart of publishing, or can an agent be just as good in other cities? You know, it's hard to say. Book publishing is really properly situated in New York City. All the major publishers are there, all the major agencies are there. There's a reason why it's there. It's the same way that if you were an actor, and someone would say, "Where's your agent base?" And you said, like, Mobile, Alabama. Nothing against Mobile, Alabama, but it's not where the film and TV industry. It's not where Hollywood is. People would be scratching their heads thinking, is their agent really properly situated in the industry? And it's sort of the same with us. Like, if you're not in Manhattan, if you're not really deeply enmeshed in publishing, where you can go and meet with editors, whether it be for lunches or at their offices, be in the major city for publishing, you have to ask yourself, is my agent really in it? They might be, it might be like a different hustle for them than, you know, really being deeply enmeshed in the publishing industry. So I think it is a plus, actually, to have an agent who is in New York, because that's where the publishing industry is situated, for better or worse. Um, it just so happened that way. History had it where publishing never really moved out west or somewhere else. It just kind of always stayed kind of New York centric, which I think is kind of a good thing, because New York City is a huge cosmopolitan international city. So we, for instance, have film and TV companies that fly in to see us there. We have, foreign publishers who fly in there to see us, and all the big publishers are in our front yard. Um, but I think, this all should help, give people a good understanding. Hopefully, this puts some wind in everyone's sails, and that you've enjoyed your time with the ASB Author Showcase. And then I hope you all go forward and feel good, and have successful publishing journeys. So I wish you all well, and thank you for this.